Hello and welcome to everybody that's joined in for our webinar this afternoon. My name is Jason Swab. I'm the Senior Partner here at Holborn Assets in Spain. And this afternoon I have the pleasure of introducing a good friend and colleague of mine who specialises working with expats who live in France. For those that have not spoken with Holborn before, Holborn specialises working with expats all over the world. We have local consultants that know the local tax regimes in each of the countries that our clients reside, and of course a great understanding of the different investment, pension and saving options in each of those countries. Sam's going to be talking in quite some detail in regards to everything that you need to know in France. I'll let Sam take it from here. We hope you take a lot from the webinar this afternoon, and for any questions or queries, please do feel free to contact Sam directly, and we shall speak to you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name's Sam Daines. I'm the Senior Associate here at Holborn. And what I want to talk to you today is about investing in France post-Brexit. So what I'm going to cover off today is really just about the different types of investments that are available in France, what their benefits are, what their restrictions are, and what potentially you should be looking to do with your funds if you're French resident, or even if you're not French resident, what are the best areas to look at? But before I go into that, what I want to do is just tell you a little bit about Holborn. A lot of you may already know a little bit about us, but just to give us a little bit of background on what we do. Bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, so at Holborn, we are a family-owned business. So we've been going since 1998. We started in the United Arab Emirates, and we've been grown to be one of the leading financial advisors offshore. So as I say, a lot of you may have heard of us. We operate worldwide, so we've got offices in the UK, offices in Europe, offices in South Africa, in the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Now, I'm based here in our European office, so my speciality is very much the French market, and I look at really the different options you will have in France and what would be best for you if you are resident or looking to be resident in France. In terms of our certified credentials, advisors here, such as myself, we're all fully qualified. So I was qualified in the UK, I've got my diploma level 4. I've been giving offshore advice for over 5 years, and really for me it's about understanding the market that I'm looking at, and as I say, that is the French market, and there's so many aspects to it you need to be aware of, and there is a lot of detail, and this is why I'm here. Very important to a lot of people. As a company, we are registered and regulated in all the areas that we provide advice. Our strategic credentials in terms of what we look to do with all our clients is very much about looking how we can help make your money work harder. So we need to make it tax efficient. We need to make sure it's doing what you want it to do. And really what we go by is trying to put the right money in the right place at the right time. My own experience, my background, I've given advice in the UK for over 20 years, worked for HSBC, Nationwide Building Society, giving financial advice. I moved offshore over 5 years ago, and now looking to give the offshore same level of advice as you'd expect in the UK, but to expats like myself who've moved over here, who certainly want to advise and to know very much about what their options are. So that's a little bit about us, and you've got our website that you can look at. So you've got my profile on there. I can be found on Facebook, on LinkedIn as well. So please feel free to drop me a message, whether that's now or later on. You know, I'm always available and I will always get back to you. So let's look at some of the investments that are available in France. And these will be ones that are more familiar to a lot of you. But some of them may be, some of them may not be. So first of all, we've got the Compte Titre. Now, this is a type of investment in France that some of you may be aware of, some of you may not. Now, this is a very flexible type of investment. So there's no limits on what you can invest. There's no ways in how you can invest your money. It's effectively an open architecture structure where you can invest in shares, you can invest in bonds, you can invest in any way you want. So it gives you that flexibility. You can set it up in sole name, you can set it up in joint names, you can set it up as a company. So where that may seem very good, and it is very good because you've got that flexibility, where maybe for some people it is less so, is that there isn't any tax benefit. You are effectively holding the investments you want, but the growth you may get, there could be tax consequences. So again, if this is something you may hold or something you want to look at, then please let me know. It's something I can certainly sort of break down for you and give you some more information on. Next on here is the livret A. Now, this is one that certainly a lot of my clients have. It's very popular over in France. It was initially only available through La Poste, and there's around 60 million accounts held in France with a livret A. So, as I say, a lot of people will hold them. You can have one for yourself, you can have one for your partner, you can have one for your children. So in a household, they can have a number of different livret A's, which is great. The side you need to be aware of, which you would be if you had one and you'd been in to speak to somebody about it in a local bank, is with regards to livret A, there are limits in terms of what you can put in. So there's certain specific limits, they do change, but quite often that can be restrictive. And where some people have suffered, probably similar to people in the UK who hold cash ISAs, is that the interest rates are so low. So whereas you're benefiting from a tax perspective, the interest rate you're getting is not very high. And that's where a lot of people maybe are moving out a little bit from the livret A. But on the positive side, that there isn't any social taxes and there's no French income tax. So it effectively is very similar to an ISA. One interesting point to note, which a lot of people aren't aware of, with a livret A, you don't actually have to be French resident. You can be residing outside of France and still hold one. However, your tax benefits there are very much going to be down to where are you resident and what is their status in terms of the tax on that. So do be aware of that if you hold one. Again, let me know, drop me a message, and I'll certainly be happy to help or have a look at that for you. Another one which I picked out here that I say best ways or most popular ways, it's certainly a way people should consider, is what's called a UAP, a Universal Access Plan. Now, this is a very complex way of investing, but has a very good benefit if you look to do it. And again, I'm probably going to do another webinar or certainly a video on this because I think it's important people are aware of this. It's effectively a way that you can legally bypass wealth tax. So this is a way of effectively putting all your assets, if you like, into one big basket and protecting them from wealth tax. So if you've got property, if you have other types of investments, you can put it within this basket, if you like, and effectively you're bringing it outside your estate, similar to a pension. However, obviously, there's a number of things you would need to be aware of if you're doing this. So this is something, as I say, I will go into more detail with. However, in the meantime, if you do want any further information, again, drop me a line, drop me a message, find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and let me know, because it's certainly something that a lot of people are unaware of that they should consider. And the last one on here is the Assurance Vie. Now, this is one of the most popular ways of investing in France. And this is really what I'm going to concentrate on today, because I think for the people who may already be aware of it, there are things you should be aware of about them. And for people that are not aware of them, need to be aware of them, because they're certainly the way, if you are living and you are residing in France, you need to be looking at this as an option and a way of investing. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a little bit of information on Assurance Vie. What is it effectively? Okay, so basically an Assurance Vie simply means life assurance in English. And it is without one of the best, I say best, the most tax efficient ways of investing in France. And it can be as simple or as complicated as you actually want it to be. So some people may already be aware of this, but they may have a particular type of version. But essentially what it is a tax efficient wrapper. So you can have an onshore version, you can have an offshore version, but what it's effectively doing is giving you a wrapper that can be particularly beneficial for expats. Particularly the offshore version can be beneficial because it actually has a number of advantages to people that maybe have the onshore version. But essentially it is this tax wrapper that is providing you with these tax benefits. And within this investment, you can have one or more underlying investments, okay? So what people need to be aware of is if you are with a particular French bank, you may have gone in there and no doubt would have been recommended an Assurance Vie because of these tax benefits, which I will talk about later. But what you've got to be aware of is certainly within a French bank, they will have a restricted offering in terms of how you generate the return. So you, on one hand, are having an Assurance Vie with the benefits, but on the other hand, they're very restrictive on where this money can be invested within the wrapper. So on one hand, you'll be getting tax benefits. On the other hand, you may be getting a low return. So you need to be aware of this. And if you do have one, as I say, please let me know, because it's really essential that you have this reviewed, because you need to make sure it's not just about the tax, but it's about the growth that you're getting as well. So as I said before, they're readily available in France, and you have the offshore versions available. And I will touch on this later with regards to the offshore versions. But whatever you've got, if you do have one, you've effectively got significant tax benefits if you are living in France. The way to look at it, is an analogy I always use, is like a shoebox. Okay, so it provides tax benefits when you hold things within this shoebox. But what you put in this shoebox depends on the type of assurance fee that you take out. Okay, so bear that all in mind. I hope that's made it a little bit more simple. So, some interesting facts about an assurance fee. So most French families and government members will have them. I mean, this is, as I say, like people were taught when I was in the UK and I was given advice, the first thing you would recommend someone is take out an ISA. Obviously, there's different types of ISAs, but the first thing you'd say was take out an ISA. And this is very much the mentality of what has been taught in France, or for advisors such as myself, as to people who are within France. So from the point of view of how much is held in an insurance fee, well, as of the end of February 2019, there was 1.798 billion euros held in insurance fees. So that's 1.7898 trillion, 1,798 billion euros, which is obviously such a significant amount of money. And this is why, particularly with Brexit, and people looking to make sure their money is safe and their money is wrapped in the right way, if you like, not just for growth, but for tax planning, for estate planning, for passing on your wealth, all that side of things, this is why an assurance fee is very important. And as I sort of mentioned before, it's essentially viewed as a French version of an ISA. Arguably, the livret A is very similar as well, because again, that's got the tax benefits, but again, it has them restrictions. So next, some more sort of information around this. Okay, so the tax benefits of an assurance fee, and this is really important. Okay, so if we look at the shoebox analogy, in an insurance fee, your income tax and your capital gains tax are never applied. They're not applied as long as the withdrawal doesn't take place. So take your shoebox, put your money in, close the lid, and as long as that stays in there and you don't take anything out, there is no income tax, no social taxes, nothing to pay. And what that means for you as a person holding one is it's effectively benefiting from a compounding effect over time. It's what a lot of people will refer to as gross roll-up. So your money is effectively just rolling upon itself, getting larger and larger and larger without that need to have to pay tax. And certainly when you're looking at investments held within the UK, and I will mention at this point as well, is that if you hold ISAs and investments such as that, and you are French resident and these are held within the UK, they are fully taxable. So you might have an ISA and think, I've got my money in an ISA, I've got this same benefit. Well, you haven't, because an ISA, as soon as you become resident in France, will not have the same benefits. But this, as an insurance fee, will benefit from this compounding effect over time. And it's only when this withdrawal takes place will the growth elements be subject to tax. So don't look at it as you take your money out and I'm going to take 5,000 out, my 5,000 is going to be taxed. That's not it at all. It is only going to be the growth element. So if you don't have any growth, you actually wouldn't pay any tax at all. So you wouldn't be in a bad situation. But obviously, if it comes to the point where you're getting a good level of growth, then that's where you'll pay the tax on. And I will give you some examples later, because I think it's important to understand how this works. And it's not complicated, but it's something worth sort of getting your head around. Okay. Another point about an assurance fee, and a lot of you may have heard this directly or indirectly, is that after 8 years, further benefits apply. And this is why we say to people, and certainly my clients in France or clients who are living in France, is you kind of want to get this clock ticking, because after 8 years, you are going to have even more benefits than what you get at the beginning, which I will come on to. So the next slide is going to help you understand a bit more about how the tax works and what the tax is currently on an assurance fee. So I'll give you some examples. Before I do that, just be aware that in 2017, on the 27th of September, the French government tried to simplify the assurance fee and how it's taxed, because there's so many investments within France that they were trying to make it easier to understand how it works. So everything I'm talking about from now on is what it's been since 2017. However, some of you out there may have held your Assurance Vie before 2017. Now, I'm going to quickly run through these figures with you, and it might not mean a lot, but if you've held an Assurance Vie at the moment, this applies to you. Is that when you take your money out of your Assurance Vie, the way you are taxed is still only on the growth, but the way it works, if you've held an Assurance Vie prior to 2017, is that in the first 4 years, you're taxed at a rate of 35%, okay? In the second 4 years, that will drop down to 15%, and after 8 years, it drops down to 7.5%, okay? So again, it had that 8-year clock, so if some of you people might already have it in place, then it's great because you are now on that lower tax bracket. In addition to that, you do pay social taxes on the growth of 17.2%, okay? So bear that in mind. And again, anybody who's held one previously, please, please, please contact me because it is really important that you review them. It's not just about the tax, it's about the growth. But obviously it's important if you already had one in place and you've had it for 8 years, there could be sort of very good benefits to that. It may be worth topping that one up you've already got. It may not be, depending on what type you have. Okay, so moving on. So let's have a look at the tax figures and the calculations of an Assurance Vie. So what are the tax amounts during the first 8 years? Okay, so this is where it's different from pre-2017. The tax amounts during the first 8 years effectively stay the same. It's a fixed rate of 12.8% income tax and 17.2% social taxes. Okay, so that's a fixed rate for 8 years. That's what it is. It doesn't change, which basically means of the growth element, and I keep stressing that, you would pay 30%. Okay, so that's for the first 8 years. After the first 8 years, again, this magic clock ticks. After 8 years, effectively, what's happening there is your income tax, instead of paying 12.8%, drops down to 7.5%, which is the same rate, obviously, as the pre-2017 Assurance Vies. And the 17.2% social taxes still apply. So in total, you're paying 24.7% on the growth. However, again, this is where the benefit kicks in of the 8-year clock. And before I say this as well, the threshold is 150,000. I only say this if any of you do have a higher amount, that although that lower rate applies to 8 years, if you've got more than 150,000, you only get that lower rate on the bit below 150,000. The bit above it would be the 12.8%. So it's still benefiting, but the more you've got in there, it's slightly less benefit. But there is another effectively advantage that comes in, and this is where I'll touch upon this now. And this is the bit I was trying to get to, is after 8 years, you have a tax-free allowance of 4,600 euros for a single person or 9,200 euros for a married couple. Now, this is a huge benefit because what it's saying is each year you've got this allowance. So if you're taking money out and you've actually had quite a bit of growth, and I'll give you an example later, then effectively you can be taking money out, and because of this allowance, there isn't any income tax to pay whatsoever. So you're effectively not paying income tax when you're taking the money out. It doesn't matter how much growth you had up to a certain point, okay? And in terms of succession planning, this is another thing. I am talking about returns. I'm talking about the tax benefits of holding it and taking it out. But really what a lot of people, certainly a lot of my clients have taken out an Assurance Vie, is the huge benefits with regards to succession planning. The proceeds paid out from an Assurance Vie largely override succession law and tax in France. So, a question that any number of beneficiaries can receive, and I'll come on to this, completely free of tax. So what it effectively means is you're going to have your allowance in France of 100,000 euros, which you can leave to your children, as I'm sure you're aware. But actually, if you have an Assurance Vie, what you can do is have an additional 152,500, which is the answer, 152,500 euros in addition to that 100,000. In brackets there, just means if you are over 70 and you take one out, this is when you take it out, is 30,500. So be aware of that. If you've had one and you are over 70 now, you took it out when you're under 70, you will get that higher benefit. But if you now take it out, for example, when you're 72, you'll get that lower benefit. But if you think about it, then you can actually pass on that money, 152,500 in addition to 100,000 to all your children. And with regards to the 152,500, that doesn't just apply to children. You can nominate any number of beneficiaries. So if you think about it, you've got Assurance Vie, you can be literally giving it away if you've got lots of people you want to leave it to without actually having to pay the tax. So this is a key tool with regards to succession planning, and something that everybody really should be aware of. So what I want to do now is just give you a calculation. I'm sort of explained it to you, and I think it's important to really understand it. So I've done an imaginary example, trying to keep it as simple as possible. But let's say you had an investment of 100,000 euros. Let's say John Doe takes a withdrawal after 1 year of 10,000. So you put your money in, probably intended to put it there for longer, but needed to take 10,000 out. And the investment had done very well, done well over that year of 5%. So a nice return. He's taken out your 10,000. Then obviously, as I mentioned before, the income tax you would pay would be 12.8% and 17.2% social charges. So this is because it's less than 8 years. Okay, so it's only the growth element that's going to be taxed. So if you take out 10,000 euros and your growth is 5%, you're only going to be taxed on 5% of the 10,000. So you will only be taxed on 500 euros. So although you've taken the 10,000 out, it's only 500 euros that you'd be taxed on. And that would be calculated that your income tax would be 12.8% of the 500 euros, which is 64 euros. And the social would be 17.2% of the 500 euros, which would be 86 euros. So that actually means in total, for that 10,000 withdrawal, it would be 150 euros that will be paid for the social and for the income tax that you had to pay. So it's still a low amount of tax. So again, there's benefits there, and it's the more growth you have, the more you're going to pay. The less growth, the less you're going to pay. But certainly, you can see the tax benefits there straight away. However, after 8 years, it gets even more beneficial. And this is a calculation of that particular example. Okay, so again, we've got that 100,000 euros. And John Doe wants to take a withdrawal after 8 years. So 8 years, he wants to take out 10,000 again. Okay, so 10,000 euros after 8 years. But this time, obviously, the investment's been running longer. Let's say he's made 15%. The income tax you're going to pay will drop to 7.5% because you're not paying that higher amount anymore because you've had it more than 8 years. And your social will stay the same, always stays the same at 17.2%. There is ways, by the way, people ask me about social, paying the social tax. There are times when people wouldn't have to pay it, but it can be a little bit more complex. So I'm sort of trying to keep it simple here again, but any questions around that, please do let me know. But anyway, so 10,000 euros, you made 15%. So you will be taxed on 1,500 euros. So that's the 15% of the 10,000. So using it the way we were talking about before, looks a bit busy, that last bit there, but you would only pay income tax of 7.5% of the 1,500, so that's 112 euros 50, and the social tax is 17.2% of 1,500, which is 258 euros. But, and this is demonstrating, if you like, the tax-free allowance, because if it's a single applicant, a single person, they would have a 4,600 euro income tax allowance. So they wouldn't pay the 112 euros 50 because it's well within their allowance of 4,600. Okay, that's well within it. So that's an example of a 10,000 withdrawal making 15%. You can see by them sort of figures that you really could have a hell of a lot of growth and still not have to pay income tax. As I say, the social would still be paid, but again, there are situations where that might not be the case. And again, please let me know if you have any questions about that. And the final little bit I just wanted to go through, which I think is important, and I know some of you may have questions around this, which I do suggest the best way of doing this may be to drop me a line, as I say, find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, but please let me know if anyone's got any questions now, obviously send them through. But I just want to give you the benefits, because I spoke earlier about an offshore Assurance Vie. And I think the reason I'm doing this, because certainly a lot of my clients aren't aware of this, and a lot of people would have been into their local banks and they would have taken out their Assurance Vie with the bank. But that will be what's called an onshore version. The offshore version, to give you very sort of clear clarification here, will have exactly the same tax benefits. There is no different. It will be treated exactly the same. But where it can differ slightly for people in the UK, or people who certainly hold money in the UK, is you don't have to invest in euros. You can invest in other currencies such as sterling. So if you go to a local bank in France, you say, I want to open an Assurance Vie, they will say, well, you have to open it in euros. If you take out an offshore version, you can open it in sterling or other currencies, depending on the providers. We're independent, so we will look at all the people out there for you. So depending on the provider, they will effectively let you invest in other currencies. Now, where you can see this is beneficial, going back to what I was speaking about before, if somebody holds an ISA in the UK, which they may not realise doesn't have the same tax efficiency as if they were UK residents, then they might think, well, I want to take my money out of my ISA, I want to put it in Assurance Vie. But obviously, the way the exchange rates are at the moment, they're changing all the time. And a lot of the time, certainly my clients don't want to be playing the currency game and thinking, well, do I change it now? They might be thinking, well, I want to change it at a later point. Now, obviously, they can do that with an Assurance Vie because effectively you can invest, let's say, in sterling, put that into your Assurance Vie, and then at a later point, move it over to euros. You don't have to invest in euros straight away and take the exchange rate as it is now. You can effectively wait and do that at a later point. And that is a huge benefit when you think about it, because when the difference of exchange rates on investments, you can take a hit if you're having to change your currency, which you would not have to do with an offshore Assurance Vie. You have far more choice of investment options. And this is what I touched on before. The French versions are very basic. So a bank will provide an Assurance Vie, but what they will have is the bit that fills the shoebox, as the analogy I used, could be very basic or simplistic investments. And when you take out an offshore version, you have the option of simple investing within it, but you also have the option of more complicated options. So if somebody's more adventurous, they can have more adventurous portfolio. If somebody's more cautious, they can have cautious portfolio, but there's a lot more choice. And as I say, we're fully independent of what we do here at Holborn. So it's a matter for me of going out and looking at different providers and thinking, well, what suits my client? Which provider will provide what my client is looking for? Designed for expats. So this may seem like a small detail, but actually a lot of people I speak to, this is quite a huge thing. An offshore Assurance Vie is really set up for expats. So all the correspondence they give you, everything that comes from the provider will be in English. It will be designed for, well, not to say English people, but English speaking clients, which can help a lot of the time. Because again, certainly sort of living abroad, you do know that sometimes when you have statements or you have various things coming through, it is hard to pick them apart and actually understand what they mean. So this again is a good benefit. Internationally portable. Okay, so a lot of clients, particularly with Brexit situation, when not just Brexit but various other situations, may not be planning to stay in France. So ultimately they're in France now, but let's say in 8 years time, 10 years time, 15 years time, they might want to move back to the UK, or they might want to move over to Spain, or wherever they want to go. An offshore Assurance Vie is fully portable. So unlike the onshore version where you would have to close it down, you can hold it, you close it down, and you'd have to take your money out. With an offshore version, it's internationally portable. So you can effectively take your money and keep it where it is and effectively move where you're going. And then what would happen effectively with the wrapper that you have with the shoebox is it will become compliant in the country that you go to. And if that's, for example, the UK, again, it will be treated like an offshore bond, and offshore bonds themselves had significant tax benefits. You can also, without going into too much detail, there is a thing called gross roll-up, which could apply to taking a policy such as an Assurance Vie back to the UK, which can have significant tax benefits. So, for example, somebody moving from France to the UK and then potentially taking their money out whilst in the UK, this could be huge. Because again, without going into too much detail, it could be that you pay very little, if not no tax, because you've moved back to the UK. And the way that's then calculated is almost resetting your investment at that point. Again, there's lots of things to understand about this, and this is exactly why I'm here. So please let me know if you have any questions. But do bear that in mind. Don't just think, well, there's an Assurance Vie, I might not be staying in France. Obviously, look to the fact if you are planning to move away, then certainly there are options, and this is portable. The final one here, it may not be too applicable to a lot of people, but I do put this in. Sometimes, depending on what type of Assurance Vie, whether that's onshore and offshore versions, they can be, certainly if you take out a longer term Assurance Vie, it could be that your provider may have penalties for the first 3 years or 5 years if you decide to take your money out. Depends on what you decide to take out. However, if you do put your money in and then you need it as an emergency in the first few years or whatever, which you did not plan to take out, the way that the gain is calculated, going back to my early calculations, the way that the gain is calculated is always on the surrender value. So even though your actual value of investment will be higher, because that particular provider may have penalties for them first couple of years or whatever it may be, when they calculate your gain, it's always on that lower surrender value, which does mean that quite often it means you wouldn't actually have to pay the tax at all, because although your investment may be high, your actual gain, if they use a surrender value, would be 0 or less. So again, that can provide a benefit. So that is some of the information really with regards to the offshore version. Now that's all I've got today in terms of the different investment types. I've touched mainly on the Assurance Vie. I will go back and look at UPA. That is something a lot more complicated, and again, that's something I will go into detail with, but don't let that hold you back. Please let me know if you've got any queries about that. And the other investments like the Livret A, the Compte Titre, if you want any information about them, obviously we can provide that and can do a comparison on what you've got at the moment and a full review. As I say, we're independent. We can go out and look at all the providers. We're not tied to any particular provider, but what we can do is look at what you've got and then look at what your options are. In terms of the questions and answers, I think the best way to do this, I'm conscious of time here, is you've got my details. Obviously, on the first slide there, you've got my contact details. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on LinkedIn. You'll see me posting videos about various things with regards to France. So have a look. Contact me. Any questions you have, feel free to do so. And thank you for joining me. And I look forward to hearing from you. And I hope that was useful for you. Thank you.